Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Stoveside Chats. My name is Chad Blackwelder with the North Carolina Department of Revenue. Thank you for tuning in. Those who are doing so, we appreciate that. We appreciate you guys following and waving. We have a good interview today, or I feel like it's going to be a good interview. Rita D. Farms, thanks for joining us. Ledford Lydia, thanks for joining us. You Savvy, thank you also. Thank you guys very much, man. It means a lot that you guys are watching and waving, and I try to wave back as much as I can, but sometimes I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, so sometimes it's hard for me to keep up with all the waving and try to conduct an interview. So if I don't get a chance to wave to you, know that in my mind I'm waving to you. All right, let's see. All right, I think that's yes. All right, so I'm going to invite Chef in. So yeah, Chef Cheetie Kumar of Garland in downtown Raleigh is on the interview today, and there she is. Hey, Chef, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you to Anders Benton, Chef Anders, for joining us. Appreciate that, buddy. Good to see you.
Hello.
All right, so Chef, tell the folks about yourself, where you're from, how you got started in this crazy business.
Well, I'm originally from India. My family immigrated to the United States, to the Bronx when I was 8.5. I went through public school there and graduated high school. And after college, ended up here in Raleigh for really no reason other than it just felt like home. And it was the first place that I chose to live in my life. And there was something about, I don't know, it felt like I had potential, and I was young and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and had a very convoluted path to professional cooking, which I really only started in earnest when Garland opened, when I opened the restaurant. So yeah, I played all the time, but you know, I've always been an avid cook, and was always really interested in learning about it all the time and educating myself. And, you know, of course I learned from my family and my mom and my grandmother. But I think opening the restaurant really was a big kick in the rear and understanding the difference between cooking and being a chef and running a restaurant. There were a lot of hard lessons, which I'm still learning.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process, that's for sure. I cooked for a long time and had a few restaurants. And when I made that move from, you know, being a line cook or a sous chef to owning your own place, completely different beast altogether.
It really
is.
And
it's absolutely, it's amazing that you say that you really like got started on a professional level when you opened up Garland in 2013, and what you all have accomplished is stunning. I mean, you have gotten, you know, you're so involved with the community, with doing charitable efforts, and I know you do a lot of work with Southern Foodways Alliance and that sort of thing. And that's a lot to balance. Talk a little bit about like that time between when you opened Garland and you really started gaining some traction and getting some, you know, some good media and having to be away from the restaurant and then having to balance that part of it.
I mean, that was not something you know, just like having the restaurant wasn't really something that I planned on. The first full year of operation was 2014. So between 2014 and 15 and half of 16, I was just, you know, I worked probably 90 hours a week, like a lot of, you know, new business owners, and especially if you're a chef owner, you're wearing so many hats, and, you know, we were undercapitalized and all of the classic, we made every mistake you could possibly make in opening a restaurant. And I think that the support of the community as we grew, as they kind of like found us and we found each other in a way, that's the only thing that helped us survive. And the fact that we were in Raleigh and had other chefs that were, you know, really just amazing shoulders to like cry on and to stand on. And I learned a lot from watching other people. And then when the sort of invitations started to come in, it really made me, first, of course, everything is scary, but then it made me realize what my job actually should be and could be. And, you know, being a business owner and an employer, especially when you're responsible for feeding people gives you a lot of responsibility, and you can't, I realized that I couldn't be intricately involved in every minute of service in the restaurant and sort of guide the business and propel us into a direction where we really needed to be in order to support farmers and, be involved in the community and raise the awareness of the links between food and social justice and, responsibility. So that was definitely, it's still really hard to balance everything. But like I said, I'm used to working 90 hours a week. It's just not always on my feet now. There was a lot of travel, up until February, actually March of 2020. But you kind of learn how to be organized, and you start to think about things more like a chef, even like you organize your recipes in a way that they're kind of you don't have to be there for every step of everything, and that requires a real thoughtfulness about what you can and can't do, and sometimes there are sacrifices involved, but within those limitations, I think creativity happens and it has a chance to blossom. So I don't know if that's a real answer, but
No,
it's an ongoing challenge and struggle, and this year, of course, has presented so many of those. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, it's good that you recognize the fact. I think a lot of chefs kind of keep themselves tethered to the stove, and you can really only grow your business so far if you do that. So it's, I guess getting some of those invitations early on kind of pushed you into thinking that way early about, I need to kind of, still be a big part of the restaurant, but know when to detach to go do all these other things to be able to promote ourselves and all that fun stuff.
And really, you do a disservice to your staff by not letting them, take a little bit of responsibility. And ultimately, nobody's with you forever. There's no such thing as a permanent employee. That's a business partner. So you want people that are with you to spend their time growing and learning. And I think showing faith in them and giving them some responsibility that is focused and structured and clearly communicated is really important. And that's a big part of our job too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important in fostering young cooks, is giving them that responsibility so they're, become more invested in, in what you're doing and your vision as a chef and as a restaurant. Now, you spoke early about March. Talk to us about Garland and COVID. I know it's been hard on everybody. What have you guys done? I know you shut down for a little bit, but what else have you done to sort of navigate this whole mess?
Yeah, we were closed from March 16th to right before Memorial Day, and the few weeks before Memorial Day, we started trying to figure out how to do what we could do to operate safely. At that point, we weren't really sure about, and we still aren't sure about what's going to happen. So we had kept a handful of people on payroll to a limited capacity, and we just thought, I was unsure. If we rehired people to cook and just do takeout, we would have to have a prep team and an evening team. And I just didn't think that we could sustain that much of a loss. We were already losing money all the time. So we started doing a heat and eat meal kit thing that we could do with only our prep and management team. And so we did that through the summer as we figured out how to build out our patio. And then the city, coincidentally or at the same time, introduced this plan, this project to be able to expand our sidewalk seating to the entire sidewalk and use the parking spaces in front as the sidewalk for pedestrians. So that really took several weeks of planning, buying furniture, and investing money in that. And it was still 100 degrees at that point. So basically the second after Labor Day that it got to be nice enough to sit outside, we have been doing outdoor dining since then. But today kind of feels like the first day of winter, so here comes another period of decision making. So yeah, we're doing outdoor dining, takeout, delivery. We have another heat and eat meal kit for Thanksgiving, and we're probably going to do similar things for the other holidays coming up. But it's a scary time as the numbers go up and we're faced with the decision to do indoor dining. It's I'm not in a very, none of us in the restaurant business are in enviable positions.
Yeah, I know been rough. I've talked to chefs from all over the state, and it's been heartbreaking to hear. And I know people are doing the best they can, and a lot of if I say this all the time, this has been a horrible period, but if anything is come out of it has been creative thinking and thinking outside the box. And I mean, that's what chefs do. That's really, like, chefs can pivot quicker than any group that I know of. And I know it's been a challenge for you guys, and we, appreciate, you doing what you do and being a huge part of your community, and hopefully things will get better moving forward. I want to talk a little bit about Garland and your style of cooking, and how you what's your process like in creating menus and balancing your style with local ingredients and all that good stuff.
Well, the big reason why I loved North Carolina and Raleigh in particular was because of the seasons and going to the farmer's market for the first time. My mind was really blown because I hadn't really experienced that kind of eating since India. My parents used to go to a farmer's market, which looked different, but it kind of really didn't. Our seasons were really similar in northern India. And, we'd find like all of the same stuff, turnips and mustard greens and okra and eggplant and tomatoes and all, and they would go every Sunday and stock up for the week and, sometimes for the month. And we didn't eat like that in New York. That's not really the style of metropolitan food shopping is very different. So coming to Raleigh made me really appreciate that and realize how much I really loved that. It was a connection to my roots in a way. And when Garland opened, I also realized like how many there's a lot of international markets. So there's a huge international population here. And so the time when, before I owned a restaurant, when I was cooking at home or for like catering or friends, like huge dinner parties or whatever, it would always be sort of Southern cooking through the lens of Asia and India. And that's just who I am. And that's my story. So honestly, I think of Garland as a Southern restaurant first, because our ingredients are what drives us and kind of informs everything that we do. If we can't get something locally, unless it's something that just doesn't grow here, like citrus or whatever, we tend to not use it. And I think that our flavors may on paper seem a little, foreign, but they're really not. There's so much, there's a lot of common sharing between India, West Africa, and the South. So it's really not that much of a stretch to juxtapose collards with ginger and coriander, as opposed to just a ham hock. It's just what's available to you, and that's sort of like an immigrant story, But yeah,
And those ingredients got here somehow, and they
absolutely,
came
yeah.
from those far away places. Now talk a little bit about, I'm sure it's different now, being in your 7th year with Garland, but when you first got started, was there a set of expectations from locals wanting more like, tikka masala or butter chicken versus like when Indian folks came in, did they appreciate your style and how you handle the ingredients they're used to, kind of seeing through a different lens, like you said?
Well, it took a while. I think initially, there's some really particular challenges that you may not think of, like what category do you use on Yelp? What category do you put yourself on Facebook? The category that I really want to use still doesn't really exist. So I have to really think about what expectation somebody has. If I call myself an Indian restaurant, which we did initially, there was a lot of backlash, like why, and even I would say even especially from the Indian community, our most scathing reviews came from Indian folks who really just were looking for the usual buffet and a chicken section and a lamb section in our menu, no samosas, and but it was a slow burn, and it took a little bit of time. And I think people that realized that this was a different sort of, a personal interpretation, and we weren't really trying to make anything quote unquote traditional and worry about authenticity so much as just more of a respect for the ingredients and a respect for the traditions. There's a difference, and it took a while to catch on. But yeah, I think, we had a personal existential crisis about how to present ourselves. And that was, sort of mirrored by people being like, what is this? Like, oh, this is not what I was expecting in any way. But
Mhm.
it took a while, but we just kept at it, and you know kept the tears to ourselves.
Yeah, you brought up a good point about authenticity and heritage as far as that goes. There has to be for um, it seems like a lot of times with like Asian Indian chefs, it seems like the folks over here who are the consumers are get a little too caught up in like, not that you don't have a story to tell because you do, certainly everybody does, but get a little too caught up on like the heritage part and forget about you as an individual, as a chef,
Right.
and your experiences and how you're taking all those ingredients and blending them through the things that you've seen, the research you've done, the things that you've experienced. Is there any truth to that, you think? Or
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there is such an expectation that me being an immigrant from India, regardless of the fact that I have spent decades in the US and only, not even a decade of very formative years, but I was a little kid and in India. And, uh, it's always interesting to me. Like, I think every immigrant or immigrant's kid will say, we don't belong here and we don't belong there. So we're sort of in the middle there. When you're a kid, you're really expected to assimilate really quickly because, kids are mean. And like, if you're different, you get razzed. And then as you assimilate and you grow up and you find your own voice, it's an individual and it's a collection of all of your experiences, then you're like, well, why aren't you Indian enough? Like, you must be an Indian cook. What's your recipe for, Amritsari fish? Like, I've never, my mom didn't make that, so I don't really know how to make it, but I know how to, poach it in a French way because it was intriguing to me. So I don't know. I mean, it's a complicated, and loaded question. What would happen if I chose to open a Thai restaurant, for example, or even a French restaurant? I could certainly teach myself uh, to be as perfect in those culinary traditions as I wanted to, as I was inspired to, because I'm a chef and that's my job. But there would definitely be a question like, why did you open that kind of restaurant? Why aren't you opening an Indian restaurant? What's so Indian about it? Or like you're,
yeah,
but it's interesting when Indian chefs in India are innovative, they're lauded. But if an Indian chef in America is innovative, they're sort of questioned or criticized, and sometimes again by more, Indian people more so than even, Caucasians. Like, this is not authentic because my mother didn't make it that way. But
yeah,
that's just one of these ongoing challenges.
yeah. Earlier when you said that you identify you think of your restaurant as Southern first and foremost, that's super interesting. And I want to ask you about your experience doing the Brown in the South dinner because that was seemed like a big focus on that whole dinner is kind of
Yeah.
how I'll let you take it from here, but yeah.
Yeah, it ended up being a series, which we were not intending. And it was, I think, such it was one of those things that gave us all that were involved in cooking in those dinners a lot of permission and a lot of like, well, sometimes when you think that you're alone and having these feelings, it's really hard to articulate. When we got all together in a kitchen and or even just planning the menu, we realized that we all have these same kind of thought processes, and it really gave us a lot of permission to A, feel the things that we were feeling, and B, to really be okay with identifying in the way that we identify. And I think, anybody who's had any kind of identity or personality or existential crisis can relate to that. Once you say it out loud and somebody else can say, I feel the exact same way, all of a sudden you can give that, it becomes a conversation as opposed to this like cloudy anxiety and fear. So those dinner series were really important because I think even though we all have a shared experience, some of us might say, I think of myself as Southern, and somebody else might say, I think of myself as an Indian American, or I'm Indian first and I'm Southern second, or I'm from Mississippi. Like when somebody asks you where you're from, what's your response? It's not so simple for some of us, you know. We really have to think about it. I used to think about what the person means, you know, and if I say I'm from Raleigh, they'll say, no, where are you really from? You're like, you know, what are you trying to get at? Like, what is the context of the conversation? So I think, you know, the context is something that we're always thinking about. And Brown in the South allowed us to really have a broad, evolving conversation about that.
Yeah. Well, you know, the people who don't live in this region kind of see Southern food as sort of, you know, one dimensional, but it's been shaped by immigrant and their style of cooking and what they brought here for a long, long time. And it's good to see that really happen here in the last 20 or 30 years. You know, I'm
Well,
glad you feel like, I'm
yeah, it's
glad
been
you're gonna
happening.
cook.
It's nice to see that conversation take traction
Yeah,
and you know,
absolutely.
for all of history to be acknowledged. I mean, we can't really grow in a deliberate and thoughtful way until we know where we can come from. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening.
That's exactly right. And that's a good note to end on. We are out of time. The time always goes by way too fast. But thank you for joining us, and
Thanks for
best of luck.
having me.
Absolutely. Best of luck at Garland moving forward, and hopefully, you know, getting all this mess under control. And I don't, you know, I say often that people in the restaurant business who think things are going to go back to the way they were should probably get out of the business now. So I don't know if there'll ever be, you know, whatever the new normal is going to be, whatever. But as we get closer to that, I wish you all the best.
Thank
If you
you.
ever need anything, you've got my email. If you need help sourcing any North Carolina ingredients or whatever, don't hesitate to reach out. I really, really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for asking me, and happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Chef Cheetie Kumar of Garland and Raleigh. That was awesome. All right, next week we have Chef Matt Hannon from Ashton's in Southern Pines. Matt is just an awesome guy. His cooking is phenomenal. Ashton's has been around for a long time. I want to say like 20 years now, and they've always been focused on using local. I know farm to fork and farm to table and all that are kind of trendy catchphrases, but they were doing it before it was cool. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. And we've got some cool stuff lined up, or I'm getting lined up for December. So I'll keep you guys abreast of that. Thank you, My Spice Fix, Brian Williamson, Chef JT Johnson. Thank you for joining us. Jennifer, I'm sorry, I can't read the rest of it, but thank you for joining. You wave and I'll wave back.